have four things on our agenda this evening. The first being Hillcrest and Lynbrook Golf Course, water irrigation rates, administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a decision from 2017. Discussions have been ongoing. I think from the city's point of view, there's been some conclusion on costing that's not been accepted by the golf courses yet. And so at this point in time, we'd like to present as an interim report and then would hold a meeting with golf courses to have more discussion about the steps going forward.
Sorry, you're just distracting me here with this. Could you just summarize that quickly again? My apologies.
You should get set up as chairperson first.
Okay.
Mr. Hemingway, could you replay that? I'm just kidding. I was just teasing.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Hold your button down. Is it green?
It's green. Yeah. Great. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. This was a decision that was made in 2017 budget to look to cost recovery on certain items. Engineering has been working quite hard on the initiative and have had discussions with Hillcrest and Lynbrook. There's no agreement on these amounts yet. So what we're suggesting at this time, if council would accept this as an interim report, and then we would endeavor to meet with both golf courses to have further discussion about the proposal.
Council, questions, comments?
Thank you, Councillor Froese. Yeah, question through you to Mr. Pufalt. That's what I was wondering is if you must be looking for a receive and file on this report then for now, and then you'll update us further, or is that what you're looking for at this point?
I believe under our procedures bylaw, we'd be looking for a tabling motion, and then we would lift from the table when we've been able to have the meetings.
All right. Well, I won't move that in case there's any questions. So, because there's no discussion on a tabling motion, but thank you.
Councilor McMahon.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions, and I know members of City Council this summer were copied on some emails back and forth with engineering, and one of the questions I know that was in there originally from the manager of the Hillcrest, I believe, was are these costs quantifiable? Do we have proof that our power bills are that type of amounts for their pumping and that type of thing? Is that what we have to be able to provide to them?
Yeah, they're all quantifiable. I mean, it's just bill invoices.
Okay. So just on the process then, I assume any deliberations you have face-to-face with the two golf courses, any recommendation has to come back through us for final approval, is that?
Yes, sir. Again, I don't know that, I think it's important to have face-to-face and have some discussion about the information that's been provided or not provided, and just make sure we're all on the same table going forward. I can't guarantee that we come to an agreement. We may have to come back to City Council and say, this is the best we're able to do. It's not an agreement, but at this point in time, we would like the opportunity to sit down and see if there's some way we can come to an agreement.
Okay, yeah, I certainly strongly recommend a face-to-face meeting. Negotiating through email is not ever something that works very well, and perhaps wouldn't have taken 2.5 years to get back to us if we had maybe just sat down with folks. And I'm not sure it's a fair apples to apples comparison, but when the report does come back to us, I would like to also have some information around how we treat football fields, soccer fields, baseball fields, watering, if the costs are marked up for finance, 11 or 12%, all those types of things that I think they're valid questions that we need to know and make sure that we're treating all sports organizations in a fair and transparent manner. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McMahon. Watson.
Thank you. I don't know if the people who have been waiting in the gallery are here to address this matter or not. Appears not. So, just one further question. Last council meeting, we granted authority to the Hillcrest to go ahead with a project there. And we're having some trouble with negotiating a water agreement, are we?
This is I guess for want of better terms, the rainwater that comes through the Snowy Springs.
I understand that. I asked, are we having some trouble reaching an agreement with the parties?
I believe that's what I said. Sorry.
Because I don't know, in negotiations, like we gave away something last meeting, and it would seem if we were looking for, I don't know why we would grant that and still have trouble negotiating something else. It just would seem like it'd be a good package deal. Had any thought been given to that, carrot and stick approach? Because that, to me, that would seem, at least from our side, a sound strategy. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, if I might, I'm not sure that one project holding off approval for one project for the other is a fair way to negotiate. Just, I guess that would be our opinion. Those are two separate projects, not necessarily tied together.
Thank you. I guess, yeah, like I was having a little bit of trouble with this report too, because I mean, the budget committee in February of 2017 kind of basically asked the same thing, that administration negotiate a renewed water supply agreement, and that it be brought back to council for future deliberation. So to me, it just kind of seems, unless I'm missing something here, like I know it talks about some of the historical costs now, but I'm just wondering, am I missing something here? Like I thought the direction already was that we negotiate a new contract. So I guess if I can get some clarification on that. And then I guess the other question is, it does say that communication began earlier this year, but that we haven't agreed to a cost sharing yet. I just like, what have we actually done over the last, I guess, almost 3 years to try to negotiate this new contract? Through you, Madam Chair.
Well, I believe that we provided all the information to the golf courses, rationale as to what the cost should be. And I believe that engineering has come to this conclusion, and they want to bring it back to City Council. And before we do that, we wanted to just have one more sit down with Hillcrest and Lynbrook and determine if this is the best way forward. Is there some reasonable grounds that we can agree upon? If we can't, we would come back to council and just say we can't. But I guess one last ditch effort to try and get an agreement that is acceptable to all parties.
Okay, so the original motion from 2017 talked about a cost plus agreement. So I guess, are we looking at, an average for the water itself, as well as for the cost for repairs and pumping and stuff like that? So is it going to be not only a cost recovery, but is there going to be a cost included in terms of like upgrading this equipment over the life of the agreements?
The costs detailed in the report are actual operational costs that we have right now. There's not a capital component included in them right now. So I mean, their engineering is working on a 3-year rolling average and splitting it between the two golf courses.
But are we going to be including like a capital component to the future replacement of, the pumps? I guess whatever infrastructure we have in place, because I think they're in the report. I'm just trying to find it here. There's pipelines. We think they're in good condition, but there are leaks, so we're not sure. I mean, again, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure that feeds the two golf courses, and only the two golf courses, that the city is incurring a bunch of costs for. So again, I'm just wanting to ensure that we're looking at that infrastructure as part of the agreement.
I believe what's being proposed is that would be a separate special project when upgrades had to occur. This was to cover the operational costs at this point in time. So it'd be a budgeted infrastructure renewal or replacement.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there are no more questions, Counselor Froese, I'll move a tabling motion. Timeline? Do you need that or?
Well, budget and Christmas is quick approaching. We'll try and certainly have a meeting within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. So table for further information and a meeting with the two groups, correct? Okay. Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? Item is RFP for trade services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the 2019 budget deliberations, one of the objectives that we wanted to work towards was continuous improvement, rationalization of services. And a concentrated approach will be undertaken to coordinate city departments in areas such as purchasing, advertising, electrical and plumbing contractors, legal and external consultants. And at council meeting of June 24th, City Council, we had a discussion about electrical, an opportunity for an RFP for electrical services. That motion was tabled as we wanted to look at our full trades. And so we're able to present this report back to you. We've attached a spreadsheet. We're over the last 3 years, we average around $937,000 in trades, and that includes electrical, plumbing, HVAC, some carpentry, not a huge amount. And then there's some specialized mechanical contracts that, again, something like an elevator or ice plant is not some tech or some expertise that's readily available in Moose Jaw. So as we looked through this, we went through an analysis of a time period of the actual bills received, estimate that the costs of the bills are 60% labor and 40% on materials with, again, average markup of around 30%. So we looked to see option one was to consider if this could be brought in-house. Many other communities do that type of service. They bring the trades in-house and in essence have a crew that maintains all the buildings in the city regardless of location. So they'll be working in an arena, city hall, water treatment plants, wherever their services are required. And they also do some capital work. When we looked at the work that we believed had to be done using the best estimates that we had, it looks like we could save about $59,000 in actual direct costs. However, that's contingent upon a number of factors, and we have a number of indirect and direct costs that would be associated with this. Again, it's a fairly large undertaking to create such a crew and integrate it into our operations. So in essence, we believe that that's too close to call, and at this point in time, that's not the recommended option going forward. Option two is status quo. That again defeats the whole concept of trying to coordinate and work services together in a fashion and get economies of scale. And then option three, which is what's being recommended to council, is we look to a coordinated citywide request for proposals for electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and carpentry, and then look to, as on a year basis, that would give us an opportunity to analyze the accounts coming in, to see the actual labor, materials, and how this potential would work. And so there's opportunity that may be able to achieve economies of scale that may bring that $60,000 to even. And if that's the case, we certainly have enough work to do as compared to coordinating and establishing a maintenance crew. So the concept, of course, is that we would put an RFP out for a year with the option for a four-year renewal. And in 10 months, we'd be able to analyze the bills that had come through and be able to report to the new council as to how this RFP had worked and make a recommendation if the RFP should be extended or if some other option should be considered. Again, that would be go back to status quo or to develop our own internal construction crew or maintenance crew. And the last thing we want to do, of course, we want to coordinate with Mosaic Place. We both have ice plants, elevators, all those things that, again, is there economies of scale that may be possible? We won't know until we try and coordinate those types of responses together. So our recommendation to council again is that we put an RFP out for a 1-year term with the option for a 4-year renewal, and that we would report back to City Council next November and discuss the how the project had worked in the first year. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilor Swanson?
Thank you. I spoke to some contractors about this, and one point they raised is they would hope that the RFP evaluation criteria would be included in the RFP. And
I believe we do that now.
they also mentioned, I think in Regina, where they'll award the electrical contract to say 4 companies, and they rotate through, and then that allows for some kind of evaluation, because if you award an RFP on the basis of an hourly rate, what prevents somebody working slower than they might otherwise do so? So there needs to be, and that brings me the concern, I'm not in favor of a 4-year renewal. Like, I don't understand why we do a 1 year with a 4-year renewal, like 2 years or something like that. I don't understand that. And I also think we should get some input from the local construction association, the Saskatchewan Construction Association. I know it was mentioned to me that previously it had been represented that they were in favor of closed tenders, and they vehemently argue they were not in favor of closed tenders, contrary to what we were told. So I would like to see some input from them. And is it the intent to bring the RFP back for approval before it's issued?
The actual documentation,
Yes.
yeah, certainly if that's council's wish. Generally, day-to-day and operational activities are our responsibility. We certainly share it with you.
Well, I say that because, previously the recycling one comes to mind, but I would like the RFP to come back prior to issuance. And I would prefer it not have a 4-year renewal. And I think some consideration should be given to, like you take electrical, for instance, 2016, $637,000, 2017, $399,000, 2018, $640,000. There is enough to spread around to 2 or 3 companies. And I think that would allow us a mechanism to evaluate who's providing the best value for the taxpayer's dollar. And also, previously, our electrical work was going to a firm, I understand, that never charged overtime. So I don't know if we want to encourage in an RFP that they submit an overtime rate. If there are contractors willing to provide straight hourly rates, no matter what day or how many hours, I think that's something that we would want to. So I think the devil will be in the details on this RFP. And I point out it was a motion I brought forward because I had concerns raised to me in the contracting community about how this work was being given out. And so I would like to maintain a level of accountability and oversight on this that's maybe more than what some might like, but those are the comments I have.
Well, certainly, I think it has to be more than a year, and the extension period is trying to allow us to work through the process and determine an extension. It could be 2-year extension. I think we're fine with that. Rotating it among 4 companies, I don't believe that does any value for the city. We have experience with a number of firms in the city, and it's to make our processes faster rather than trying to remember who we had allocated resources to. Again, if we're going to put an RFP, then let's put an RFP. If we're going to rotate the services to each business in the city, I don't believe that suits the city. That suits perhaps the businesses. And we are to work together with them and not be beholden. And so much rather suggest to council that we put an RFP out, put it for a specified time period rather than rotating it. Because I mean, that's generally what we're doing right now, as some departments have contractors they work with on a regular basis. So, I mean, I can't recommend to council that we would accept that. Certainly your decision to make, but again, we're trying to find the most effective and expedient manner for us to get our work done. And rotating is what we're doing right now. So we basically would come back full circle to do that. Again, as I said, no issue bringing the RFP back for council to take a look at, and certainly no issue in reducing the amount of time for the extension. But again, we're trying to expedite our process.
If I could, I only used the example of Regina where I understand it's 4. I didn't suggest we do it with all firms, as was mentioned, and whether it's 2 firms or 3 firms, but there's enough work to spread it around a bit. And I made the point that that would allow us to evaluate efficiency and who's giving us best value. So I disagree about just providing it to one thing. I'm not saying it had to be 4. I'm suggesting more than 1, and certainly not every electrical contractor in town. But, you know, this wasn't an issue till I brought it up. And there are concerns out there, and I think some of those concerns have been relayed to members of council. And this isn't the forum for airing those concerns, but there is some problems. And I would like to err on the side perhaps of extreme oversight on this and make sure that we're spending taxpayer dollars in a competitive way and of value to the taxpayers.
Again, I would reiterate that that's in essence what we're doing right now is rotating with different firms. I don't see.
Do we have an
the-
RFP out?
No, excuse me, I think I have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, why are we going through the process if we're going to do the same thing? I mean, if we're going to do this, if we're going to try and be effective and expedient at what we do, putting an RFP makes sense. This is not just because of June. As you recall, in 2019, which that information was presented to council in October and November of 2018, discussed the need to coordinate services. So certainly when the issue came forward, there was, I don't believe, opposition from us. It was more so, let's look at the full picture. And again, it's to, our business is that we need to be more effective and expedient at what we do. And that's what the recommendation to council is.
Councilor Eby?
Thank you. So I'm in favor of the RFP. I too want to see it not, I think the 4-year extension would coincide
With elected term sort of thing, but I think 4 years is too long. I think 2 would be good and would give the council of the day an opportunity then to evaluate and make a different decision. I do agree that with an RFP, the person, if council or administration is happy with the RFP before it goes out with all of the criteria, then I think the person or the company that is successful in the RFP should be the one awarded the work. I agree that rotating through doesn't really get us what we want to do. So I'm willing to support this, or when we get to that point, but not with a 4-year extension, just so that the council of the day, like I said, has an opportunity to evaluate. Because otherwise, it would be the next council that would be evaluating. So, anyways, those are my points.
Councilor Eby?
Thank you. So have we used an RFP for the provision of electrical services on a general day-to-day basis currently?
My understanding is no.
Okay, well, that's the difference. When I say that we should rotate it and you say, well, we're doing it that way now. You're missing the point. We haven't done an RFP prior to. We didn't establish criteria for these firms and a bid, and it was open competitive process. There is a difference. And I do not see having an RFP where companies submit and there's evaluation criteria, and we award to 2 or 3 companies as the same as we're doing now, because it's not.
Not to get in a debate, but in essence, without going to an RFP, that is what we have done because some companies have certain buildings. And again, it's basically some companies have this much work and some other companies have that much work. So, I mean, you call it what you want, but in the end, what we're doing is basically rotating between companies or giving companies certain amounts of work from the city. I think it has been noted by other council members, economies of scale may not be possible if we do it this way. So again, I don't want to get in a debate with council, but quite honestly, moving forward with an RFP is the best solution for the city. Mark.
Councilor Warren?
Thanks. Well, I'm in favor of going to market and finding the best value for, for our residents. And I've got no problem with a 2-year term. Allows, like as Councilor B spoke, allows the next council to take a look at that and evaluate. And, we've seen other contracts in the past, not necessarily built into the contract, where we may decide to extend it if we want. Council always has that option. So I'm comfortable with a 2-year to give some stability to the process. And the reality is this is not, it's not one person's decision on how we go forward. This is a collective decision made by council. So I'd be willing to move the recommendation that City Council authorize a request for proposals for 2020 for the following trades with an option for a 2-year renewal from January 1st, okay, how would that work? For a 2-year, I guess, I don't know, just a 2-year contract. I don't know if I need to put the dates in there. For electrical, plumbing, HVAC, carpentry. And I think that's it, right? A 2-year contract. And I mean, once the contract expires, a new contract has to go out. Does that satisfy, I guess, the wishes of administration in terms of moving forward on this?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Certainly, I think that fits in well with our discussions about this, and it's really what council wants, not necessarily what we want. But again, we believe the most effective way to go forward is a specified length of time, and we just clarify it's a 1-year and an option for a 2-year renewal. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, the discussion has been that council, I guess at least a couple members were comfortable with a 2-year term versus a 4-year term in the recommendation. So however we word it, I mean, my intent was with the motion was that we do a 2-year term. Just like in, pardon me?
2-year term period?
Period.
Okay.
And then again, once that term is going to be expiring, then the council of the day will make a decision with administration about what to do next.
2020 to 2022. 2-year term.
Yeah, 2020 and 2021.
Right.
Okay. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
And again, just to speak to that again, like, I mean, there's trade laws, there's rules around RFPs, around tendering, there's laws, right? So, I mean, we've got a purchasing policy. This council has agreed to it. Our administration is abiding by it. I know, again, I don't see as us as council to be getting in the weeds of the details of RFPs. As long as our administration is following the rules of our purchasing policy and the trade laws, I've got no concerns with that. And an RFP is, again, it's an opportunity to provide the best value, not necessarily the lowest cost, but the best value based on a wide range of factors, which could all, be, which administration has previously spoke to that criteria and how we evaluate that would be in the contract. So for contractors to see and state their expertise and how they would be best value for the residents of Moose Jaw. So I'm comfortable with our processes that are in place and I would support this.
Chair, if the clerk could just ask for a little clarification here. So what is intended by this motion is that there be no reference to a renewal at all, that this would be an RFP for a contract for a 2-year term. Is that effectively what's?
correct. That was the intent of the motion.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, just, I guess it's not really clarification, but so the motion then is different, is a different intent than what administration had in the report. Just to be clear that, because they had, what the report had said was that they would be, 2020 would be kind of the pilot project, and then in December of 2020, a report would come back, and the council of the day next year, if whoever is here, then would reassess in 2020 and then provide a 2-year extension. So that's my understanding. That's what the report was suggesting, but this is different. So I just want to be sure that, so Councilor Warren, you meant to make it different?
Thank you. So just to answer the question, so again, like, I guess what I was looking to do was we were kind of debating that it should be a 4-year, that we should have rotating contractors. So I guess I entered the debate to say that I'm comfortable with the intent of what administration bringing forward, but on a shorter time frame. So I guess I would be open to a friendly amendment if we wanted to have, so again, like, if we wanted to have it so that we go out for the first year, and then it comes back in December of 2020 to determine if there's a 1-year renewal option, then I guess I would be open to that amendment. That was what my intentions were, is to not change the intent of the motion to be specifically explicit to a 2-year term, but if council wanted to have that opportunity after the first year to renew that contract. I guess again, the main intent was that if we go 4 years, I mean, that puts a lot of people out of the game for a long period of time, right? So I would be open to the friendly amendment that, I don't know, maybe I'll try to word it as it's written with the 2 years. So that City Council authorize a request for proposals for 2020 for the following trades with an option for a 2-year renewal from, no, I don't know how that works, how that reads out, sorry. Great.
So 1-year renewals.
For the option for a 1-year renewal. Okay.
So, Chair, just if I could just clarify, what is the motion then?
Okay. I'll try this. Okay. The City Council authorized a request for proposals for 2020 for the following trades with an option for a 1-year renewal from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. Electrical, plumbing / HVAC, and carpentry. And then a subsequent report be brought to City Council in December of 2020 to determine if the 1-year renewal option would be approved. That makes sense. Okay. Apologies for the confusion.
Thank you. I was going to ask before and now with Councillor Warren's amendment, I just need some clarification. He mentioned that we're following our purchasing policy, and I guess are we really? Right now, we're not following it with any of these services, are we? We're not putting them out for RFPs. We're just handpicking, which I guess to me is the frustrating part about this whole process. So, like, where are we at with that? And I'm not sure how we keep steering off of our purchasing policy for some of these things.
We believe we are following the purchasing policy. A number of the work being completed is obtained by quotes based on values. And so we do believe we are following the purchasing policy.
Okay, so how many service providers do we have right now in electrical and plumbing? A number of them based on the different quotes that are the different jobs? Is that we don't have if I had an electrical issue with this plug behind us, do we have a specific person we phone or not? To fix the plug? Okay,
Certainly not very effective.
no, that isn't. Okay, no, I'm still confused. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, I first brought this motion to issue an RFP, as it said, in June, I think it's like 5 months ago. And it came about because I was told that we weren't following the purchasing policy, it's particularly with electrical contracting. And I favor the idea of a 2-year contract, because if you take the example that was put forward of a 1-year contract with a 4-year option, that's very difficult to bid on. Do you bid the same price for the 4 years subsequent to the first year? Are you going to hold your price for 5 years? Or are we going to have a contractor win it on the first time and then they have the option of charging whatever they want upon renewal? It's like, I support a 2-year contract. And that's a fixed price. And at the end of those 2 years, it can be evaluated. But options for renewal, we just went through where we had an option for renewal that didn't follow the process, didn't come to council when it was supposed to. And I didn't bring this forward because everything was going hunky-dory. And I don't agree with the option kind of thing, because how do you set a price for 4 years? And what if the person who wins the bid chooses in those 4 years to have a different price that might not be as good as somebody else? And what other factors are involved in RFP? So I agree with the original motion that Councillor Warren put forward. There'd be a 2-year contract.
Thank you. So I need some clarification, because I think what Councillor Warren moved was exactly the motion that is, or the recommendation with a 1-year renewal, right? So then what's happening from now until the end of December 2020?
At that time, we would analyze all the accounts that have gone through, all the work that's been done, and determine if it's been an effective process for us, and be able to come back and say, it's worked. We've saved a ton of staff time on obtaining quotes and doing tenders, and we should carry on with this. So there'll be some analyzation that will be completed when we come back to council. And certainly it'll be, the work was effective. We save time, we save money.
No. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know why this had to become so complicated. It didn't seem that complicated. I guess excuse me for my misunderstanding, because I would have I felt like the motion as Councillor Warren has it on the table right now, with something awarded for 2020 with the option for renewal for 1 year, 2021, in essence would be a 2-year contract. And would their price not hold for the second year, or does that all of a sudden in the second year the price changes? Or that's where I'm not, to me, it feels like this is giving them a 2-year contract, unless it really doesn't work. And then in 2020, council has the option to say, not doing it, right? So that's how I'm understanding it. Is this really is a 2-year contract, as opposed to the recommendation that came to us would have in essence been a 5-year contract. So that's my understanding of it. And if I'm understanding that correctly, then I'm in support of it. If for some reason in year 2, the people who are awarded can come back and charge us willy-nilly whatever they want, then I'm not in favor of that. But if it's established that this is when they put in their numbers for this bit, for this RFP, those would hold for 2 years if they were successful. Am I correct?
You are correct. We
Thank
have
you.
past practice of that with, I think, the recycling contract. It either will come back at, price certainty would be known, either be an escalator clause attached to it, or they'll guarantee the price for 2 years. That's what we'll be looking for when we go out. Price certainty on both years.
Right.
So they may say it's a 1% increase in the second year if we renew. At least we'll know that upfront.
Thank you. Nope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more large issue. Council will recall this came to council last budget time. At that time, we weren't sure on the pricing and we wanted to quantify the figures to a greater degree as to the cost savings that were achievable. And part of our technological advances are moving to smart metering. And what that allows us is to read our present practice is we have to actually go to site to read the meters. This would allow us to remotely read them. And it has a number of productivity enhancements available through it. And members of engineering are here to talk some of the details with you, but there's a ton of benefits to proceeding this way with a good payback.
Yeah, Darren Stephenson, the manager of utilities, is going to present the report, and well, we're all available for questions.
Good evening. There's a fair amount of information here, so I'll just kind of summarize it going through, assuming that everybody's kind of read it, and then we'll ask questions after. So we're looking at replacing the water meter infrastructure for the city of Moose Jaw. So this involves a couple things. Really, we're talking technology as far as meter reading is concerned, and also replacing the physical meters in the homes themselves. So the recommendations that have been brought forward here is that approval be granted to the Department of Engineering Services to issue an RFP for the purchase and installation of an advanced metering infrastructure, including the replacement of the city water meters with smart meters. And further, that the RFP report to council will include financing options as well as timelines to complete the project. So, the city of Moose Jaw, as city manager mentioned, is really quite outdated in our water meter technology. We do physically go to homes. Some of those homes, a good percentage, we actually have to get inside to do physical reads. Some we can go with the touchpad and touch it to the building on the outside to get reads. So either way, it's a fairly inefficient process, very labor intensive, and we're not reading these on a quarterly basis. The department, Treasury Department that does the reads tries to get 2 actual reads during the year, but the rest of the billings are estimated. So there can be a fair amount of time between actual reads on people's water meters. It's particularly problematic if you end up having an issue in the house, an unidentified leak that can cause a lot of water consumption. So there are about 12,500 meters roughly in the city. What we're proposing is looking at what's called an advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI. So that is the reading technology. Essentially, it operates a lot like a cellular network. You put up 1 or 2 towers in the city. It really depends on your geographic footprint of the city. That's determined through an analysis by the proponent companies. And that allows, with the right meter technology in place, it can instantly pull a read from a meter at any time it wants, really. Generally, they're set up to go every few hours, but that meter is constantly reading consumption, and you can pull that data at request or have it auto-generated and just sent out on a scheduled time frame. That would allow a lot of benefits that our customers currently don't have, and we've got kind of several of them listed there under the discussion section. But obviously, the first one for the city is eliminates the need for staff to actually physically attend to every home in this city to collect that reading. It can be done from a terminal pretty much anywhere. That also eliminates safety concerns, which do come up from time to time when staff are entering homes alone to do this job. Also gives us flexibility on billing cycles if we so choose to do monthly billing, for example. That is something that could easily be done under this program. Obviously, there's no manual recording of information when we're going into house and writing down what that meter says. This is all electronic. It's all accurate, done through the software, so there's no mistakes on data entry. You can configure alarms on the system. So depending on the meter that you choose, but certainly pretty much all of them that can point out to abnormal usage. So that's something that can be highlighted to the city and to the homeowner as well. Most of them do have apps. So for instance, if you do have a toilet leak, it will detect based on your water usage that something normal is not happening, particularly at night when you have that water running when you should be sleeping. It can actually send an alarm to the homeowner to say, hey, something's going on. You should probably check it out. Real-time billing, reduced billing concerns, greatly enhances transparency through our whole water meter program. There are some meters, the technology actually has advanced on the meter side that you can get meters that will remotely turn on and off, particularly where this could be beneficial is move in and move outs on rental properties, snowbirds, and even delinquent accounts so that you're not actually rolling a vehicle to the address to deal with the problem. You can also get temperature sensors in those type of ones. So the city does experience, of course, it depends on the year, but we have, say, 50 to 100 homes in the city that are at risk of freezing water lines in the winter due to the depth that their services are placed at. And you can have temperature sensors on those water meters that will actually give you, depending on what you want to set it at, but will give you an alarm that the temperature is dropping to the point where risk of freezing is happening. And then if you run the water, you eliminate the risk of that freezing. So that is a problem we deal with, a problem our customers deal with on an annual basis. And this is a solution that can help prevent that. And of course, if we've got meters that no longer read, which we do have in the system, they're damaged, stopped, or even tampered with, we would immediately know if that happens based on the usage that those meters are providing and the readings that we get. As far as the meter technology goes, kind of conventional, what we have been using, what's called a mechanical meter, essentially is a rotating disc. This can be found in the appendix on the report. The problem with those meters is that over time, they do collect mineral deposits and such that's in the water system, and they start to slow down. So as those meters age, they underread. There are new technologies out there, what they call a non-mechanical or solid state meter, which essentially uses electrodes that reads the movement of that water between 2 points as the water is passing. The benefit of those is they don't degrade. Since there's no moving parts, they maintain their accuracy for the full life that meter's in service. So you don't lose that revenue of water that's going through. Additionally, on larger meters, which have a problem reading low flow, those meters are also extremely accurate on low flow measurements. So in other words, we'll be able to bill for water that's actually being consumed versus, the conventional meters that we're using now. On the financial analysis side, we took a look at our water consumption and the discrepancy in meter reads and our annual billings from Buffalo Pound. There's about 17% of our water that's unaccounted for each year. That's due to a lot of reasons. Of course, leaks and breaks is a primary one amongst those. Provision of temporary services that we do, house-to-house connections for various leaks, service connection leaks, for instance, would be an instance where water is unmetered. Capital construction uses water main replacement, sanitary main lining, paving, et cetera. All of those use water that's not billed through the utility. And again, operational programs, so street sweeping, unidirectional flushing, sanitary main flushing, et cetera. That's all, again, all water that's used in the operational departments. We've talked about the underread meters due to aged meters. And of course, there's always the potential for theft of water. So when we look at that, look at our meters, what kind of the industry standards are and studies that are done on systems like ours, as well as combined with some of our own tests from retired water meters. Every water meter that we take out of service is tested. We're estimating a 4 to 6% additional gain in revenue by changing out the meters in this city. So that's equating to about a quarter of that 17% water loss that we have every year is essentially due to under-read water in our system. In addition to that revenue increase, there's also going to be savings in operational costs, as mentioned, labor, materials, and equipment, from reading meters at every home and business to doing shutoffs, to dealing with frozen line issues, which can be quite labor intensive trying to fix in the middle of winter. So there's a lot of benefits involved in this program. So the cost analysis side, in talking with a few, there's 3 or 4 big suppliers out there, and in just in general conversations with them on a city our size, the estimate is approximately $6 million to implement a program like this. That includes all water meters, installation, as well as the infrastructure for the AMI network. And in addition to that, we would expect that there's going to be some operational costs as dealing with issues for water shutoffs inside of properties, whether the water shutoff valves inside the home don't work, which then moves us out to the curb stop that would need to be operated to control that for the water meter changeover, and then anticipating that there will be a percentage of failures on those curb stops. That there's several different remedies that are more intensive depending on if we can solve it at the first, second, or third stage. So that cost is built into the one-time expenditures. That's something we would expect the contractor to manage along with the installation of the meters. So we've got the financial table here in the back. These are estimates, not having gone through the RFP, but we're looking at approximately $6.6 million in expenditures and expecting about a $15 to $20 million return to the city over the 20-year lifespan of the meters that we're looking at. So it gives us a simple payback model of 6.6 to 8.7 years. And we'd be looking to issue a request for proposal as discussed to engage a contractor and get that expertise required to complete this project. Again, it'll be managed much like all our other projects. There'll be a major capital one. There'll be a tech assigned as the project manager with support coming from managers within the department, other techs, and communications. So to summarize, we've gone over the cost savings. The simple payback at worst case is estimated to be 8.7 years. That's based on an annual operational savings and revenue increase of just over $750,000 a year. And that this investment fits within our budgeting principles, and recommended the city should seek to invest in infrastructure when productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness increases are possible. There's various options for financing this program, including vendor-supplied financing, which is available with some of them. Of course, external borrowing, self-financing, or reserves, or any combination of these. It's our suggestion, once the RFP proposal has been received, that the Department of Finance will then look at those options and bring a report back to council for discussion. That is all.
Thank you. There's no doubt, I guess, with the age of our water meters that we need to be figuring out what we need to do to replace them, either all at once or on a go forward basis. I guess I'm a little disappointed that the cost of financing isn't factored in this whole payback. I mean, I don't buy the 8.7 years. If you add at 5%, we're talking $300,000 a year. So that number is probably up to 15 years probably, or something. To me, I think we need to have something in there that's realistic so we can, get a true assessment of what this project is going to be. Or am I missing something?
I guess I'll take that one.
Okay.
I think that simple payback is exactly that. It's just a very straightforward and rudimentary tool used to provide some indicator and give you a general understanding of what the business case would be. You know, a more detailed analysis with respect to the financing would, I think, be carried out by the Department of Finance during the RFP. So we can bring you back that kind of more detailed financial piece, life cycle costing, kind of whatever form that takes through the RFP. But probably the biggest component that would contribute to that would be what can these companies finance it for us, right? And how do we arrive at the best value for the city with respect to, you know, the contractors that are carrying out the work, the companies that can find it, what rates can they get, and of course the allocation risk as part of that mix. I think that our financing rates are probably favorable, and part of that discussion may be what an internal financing rate could look like, given, you know, our reserves. But I would definitely defer to finance on that. So maybe to sum that up, we want to include that in the RFP. We want to see what we can get from the proponents, as they're large companies, and they have a vested interest in carrying out the work. But that doesn't preclude us from financing ourselves.
Okay, I guess to me, it's like, I mean, if we think we're gonna save 750,000, if you take 300,000 off it, that's a pretty substantial change to the overall project. But, you know, I recognize there's different financing opportunities, but anyway, you cut it, $6 million financed is gonna be a few $100,000 a year, right? It's fairly major impact, so thank you.
Mayor Tony?
Thank you. So on page 4 or 17 of 22 summary, first paragraph says the AMI project will result in cost savings from operational requirements and additional revenues from accurate meter readings. And this is the question I have. This line here. It is anticipated that there will be a new stream of monies, excuse the pun, that will be available to provide funding to finance the project over a period of time. Could you explain what that new stream of monies is?
That would be the additional revenue gained from replacing the water meters in the system.
Okay, I thought with your saying operational requirements and accurate meter readings, that was what you were alluding to. I thought there was maybe something else you were trying to say. So it's just basically recouping the losses.
Correct. And operational reduction.
Okay, I just needed clarification on that. Thank you. No further questions.
Thanks. Just a couple questions. I know it says that timelines, you know, would come with the RFP or whatever, but just ballpark, like, do we think this would take 2 years to complete, or 5 years, or a summer?
We've been given varying timelines by contractors to do this, anywhere from 1 to 5 years. So I think it's really will be largely at our discretion what we want to set that at. I would think at least a 2-year implementation you'd want to look at. I think 1 would be probably very ambitious, but that would be something we would kind of work through with at the RFP stage as well.
And how do projects like this usually roll out? Like neighborhoods, streets, quadrants of the city, or willy-nilly?
Well, having not been through it, I don't know that I can exactly answer it. I would assume they would do it in quadrants, you know, work in neighborhoods and work their way around the city. I think would be the most efficient, but.
It'll be up to the contract.
Certainly other communities have done quadrants as discussed over 4 years. And we just had information from City of PA did 9,000 over the last 5 months. So they've basically done half theirs in a year.
Okay.
So again, it's really, I think as Mr. Stephenson says, it's really dependent upon what the companies come back with, financing, years of service, all those items that will be more clear as we get the RFP completed and back to council.
Okay, thanks. And one last thing, it's not a question for anyone, it's just a comment. You know, the new money that we're gonna realize from this is really our current water users are gonna be paying more for the same amount of water that, I mean, they're still gonna be using the same amount of water, they're just gonna get billed now for what they have already been using, which to the water users isn't really gonna be a great deal, right? I mean, it's good for us because we're gonna realize the money that we should be for a service we're providing, but the water user is gonna be paying more for doing the same load of laundry or taking the same length of shower, whatever. So I totally agree with it in principle, and it makes good sense, but when you look at it from, we don't even have to raise water rates and people are going to be paying higher water bills if they've had a malfunctioning water meter, which obviously many people have had. So kind of makes me nervous for my water bill. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Froese. So I'm going to be blatantly honest and say that I'm really having trouble following how this is going to be done. I don't know why. I've read this report a couple of times, and I'm kind of confused as to where the $6.5 million is going to come from, because there's got to be a cost to these meters being purchased, right? And so where is that $6.5 million coming from? I understand we're going to recoup from more accurate readings down the road. But I mean, I look at this and I go, okay, so nowhere in here does it say explicitly and very clearly $6,570,965 is going to be paid like this. And I'm having a real difficulty following this report, and I don't know how anybody else here is. I guess obviously I'm in the dark, but I don't, for whatever reason, I have to be honest and maybe embarrass myself, but I do not understand this report whatsoever as to how it's going to be completed and where the funding is going to come from. I mean, to me, this is a report that has a very high price tag, and there is nothing in here that says this is how this is going to be paid for. So that if somebody picks up this public document, to know how is the city of Moose Jaw paying $6.5 million to do this project.
Yeah, I think it's implied, and we didn't, and so you're certainly not in the dark. I think we could have been clearer on that. Is the intent is to borrow the money, and it's either internally through against our reserves, long-term debt, and or through the companies themselves. Lots of times they'll finance part of the work. So we don't know exactly where the money will come from, other than it will be borrowed from somebody. And
Okay,
then repaid back through, again, that's what we need to get the information back, is the repayment that we're able to, or the additional revenue and cost savings we're able to achieve every year, enough to pay those payments. And that's what the report is supposing it would happen that way.
Okay, so, I mean, maybe it's not the right place for this, but, to have, we've got a financial analysis that is almost a whole page, a cost analysis that is almost a whole page, and then a 1-2 sentence financial implications that says none of that. We got to be better at that, right? So, I mean, maybe everybody else understands this report obviously better than I did, but I just think for the average layperson, the citizen who wants to take an interest in council, I don't know how anybody would get what you just said, Mr. Pufalt, out of this report. There's no cost of borrowing, for the reserves, or if we're going to borrow it from somewhere else. That is not in this report. So please, can we be better at making sure that we're very clear with how this is, I don't believe it takes 2.5 pages to try and say that and still not get to the point. So I apologize for that, but sorry, I feel I had to say something to just say I'm just completely confused, but.
Questions of council?
Well, so further to that, thank you, Councillor Froese, for the what's the word I'm looking for? Doesn't matter, latitude. Thank you. I'd like to have some of those costs, right? Like before we approve something like this. I don't know if that's possible or what, but I'm not going to delay it. I mean, I'll leave it as is, but I just think that, you know, what is going to be the cost of borrowing if we pull it out of the reserves? What's the cost if we go out to market? What, you know, we should know what those costs are before we're approving anything here, in my opinion, but thank you, Councillor Froese.
Thank you. Just a question on that. And I mean, yeah, I don't know if it was explicit in the report, but I know we've, I think during the 2019 budget deliberations, this is one of the kind of business plan items. And I think it was discussed at that time that we would be borrowing against our reserves and paying it back with the savings. I think it did state in here that depending on, now with our kind of our new investment strategy, it may be cheaper to borrow money externally than to borrow against ourselves because of the difference. But anyways, but yeah, I don't know if it was explicitly in here, but I understood it to be that we would be borrowing the money and paying it back with the savings. And that the further savings beyond the payback period, even if it's up to 9 years, we would see up to, at a minimum, $8.5 up to $13.5 million over the next 20 years going back into our water utility, which, as we've talked about, is underfunded already based on our long-term plans. So I guess just a question on the financing. So the recommendation is that this would come back, that an RFP be issued, and this would come back to council with financing options for the project. Now, I guess the question is would the RFP have some language in there that it's pending budget or council approval? Because I guess it may come back, an RFP may go out, may have some successful proponents. It may come back to council, and the council of the day says, well, we don't approve the funding. I guess wondering if that would be a part of it, and would we be open to any liabilities if that happened?
No, certainly it's an RFP, and so we would ask in there, is there financing options through the companies? What would you propose? How would you finance it? And then the analysis would come back to council and say, this is what the company's proposed. The best option is either take the company, external borrow, or borrow against ourselves. So I think that's the information that'll come back to council. Again, we don't know those figures at this point in time until we actually get out to an RFP and see what is actually being proposed, what the cost would be. We do have a good idea, I believe, on the amount of loss in the system that we're not charging for, that's coming through meters and not being recorded. And we do know that we have cost savings that will be available when we're not having to go to every door or the doors that we go to and read the meters. So there's more information to be forthcoming on this, but again, it's trying to get us to that point so that we can get enough information for council to make a decision. Again, I think we have to get to an RFP stage to get that information back to council. I mean, conversely, we could postpone for a couple of weeks and look at financing options and take it into account here. But again, I think it's worthwhile to go out to the market and see what's there, and then council can decide from there. I mean, right now it may be, that it goes to market, we find it's $9 million and we can't afford it. That's the information come back to council. But then at least we know, and it's not a speculation as to what the project could be. Because if it does hold true as recorded in the report, there's certainly substantial monies that can be allocated back towards the capital programs without increasing rates. Because again, we're losing that water that we're not charging for. So, I mean, there's a lot of good potential. It certainly, I think, behooves the city to go forward to at least the RFP stage to get the information back so we can make a recommendation and council can make a decision.
Okay, well, yeah, I just, because typically the RFPs that I've been involved in the past, there's usually a funding source identified for the issuing of the RFP. So I guess my question is without a funding source approved, if this RFP is to go out and it comes back with bidders, and the council of the day, whether it's this council next year or depending on when the report comes back, the next council after November of next year, if the funding source or funding isn't approved, does that, are we able to cancel the RFP? Because I mean, again, we don't, if, without a funding source approved for the issuing of the RFP, nothing is guaranteed when the RFP comes back. So that's my question. What, if the funding source eventually is not approved, can we cancel the RFP?
Yeah, and certainly the RFPs, tenders all have the provision that not necessarily awarded. Any or all tenders may not be necessarily awarded. Again, it's, not a whole lot different than a cast iron program. If it comes double our budget, we can't afford it, then unfortunately, that's just the way it works sometimes. But that's clearly specified in the documentation beforehand that any and all tenders may not be accepted. Or RFPs, sorry, or RFPs.
Okay. I mean, yeah, like I think this, I mean, again, we talk about modernizing, we talk about coming into this century. I think this is another good example of where we can do that again. I mean, I guess, just wondering about the information about the current mechanical meters may not necessarily reading low flows. So I guess I wondered, and maybe this is a question Mr. Stephenson can answer, but if a house had a very slow leak in a toilet or whatever the case may be, that's not necessarily something that is heard or visible by the property owner, and if our meters aren't reading the water, then I mean, this is water that's just being wasted and not being charged. Is that possible that there could be a very small, slow leak in a toilet and the meters would not pick up on that?
Yes, it is possible. On residential side, it is more likely on the larger you get with the meters. So businesses that have low flow going through, which could be a fairly substantial amount with some of them, would not necessarily get read. But yes, the bigger the meter, the more flow might not get read by these meters, particularly as they age, the mechanical meters.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I guess I guess the discussion around people are going to be paying what they're actually using. I mean that's the model that we currently have, is that you use the water, you pay the bill. Unfortunately, I guess not unfortunately, but I think with the possibly new features that may come on these new meters, if there's an alarm, if there's a leak or something like that, then that gives a homeowner the opportunity to fix their leak and stop being charged, basically, versus not being aware that there might be a leak for several months. So, having the opportunity to have those kind of alarms and capabilities through an app or whatever the case may be, I think are valuable. And I mean, obviously, we talked about this in the previous report. I mean, I think this report does a good job of identifying, take away the possibly any interest that we may have to pay on the loan, but it talks about the payback, the good analysis on the water loss that we experience, and also the fact that as part of that payback, like this is possibly seeing a reduction of 3 permanent positions through attrition, because we don't need to read meters anymore. So I thought that the report did a good job of highlighting that. So I mean, I'm supportive of this, again, with the understanding that this is going to have to come back and a funding source has to be identified, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to pay for it somehow, whether it's paying the contractor from a reserve account, or whether it's borrowing it from ourselves and depleting that reserve, or borrowing externally and having to take money from somewhere and put it towards those payments. So there has to be a funding source identified at some point. And hopefully, obviously, the council of the day will recognize, we'll hopefully see that through. So I'll hold it there. Thanks.
Councilor Eby?
Thank you. I guess in theory, I'm in favor of going out to market and seeing what's there. And thank you for the wording, not necessarily awarded, because I think that would be key, right? Because, if it comes back at $9 million or something, but regardless of, what it costs today, it's going to cost more than that in 10 years or in 20 years when it really needs to be done. But back to the funding source, and, to think about it being paid for through the savings you know, that's a great thought and good in theory, but year one, those savings aren't going to be as large as year 5. And if it takes 5 years for the whole project to come into play, then it's going to take 5 years to realize all the savings, right? So I think we have to be a little bit careful in using that. I mean, we've seen that even with cast iron. That was one of the, you know, the selling points of, you know, we were going to be able to fund cast iron through the savings. And, you know, in year 4, we still haven't realized that. I'm fine with that, but we just can't use that as our full funding source, because if those savings aren't there, we still have to pay. And I don't know at this point where that line in the budget would be. So, you know, to be wholeheartedly, yes, jump it up and down, let's do this. Without that information is hard. But like I said, in theory and with the not necessarily awarded piece, I can support it, but there's just not enough information on what budget line that would look like. So thanks.
Councillor Swanson?
Thank you. You know, one of our primary jobs, much like a board of directors, senior management, is the allocation of capital. And given the financial situation of the city of Moose Jaw, where our capital demands far exceed our ability to pay, I believe this is a poor allocation of capital. I was going to reserve my comments for when this went to council next week, and I think I'll do the majority of that. But I appreciate those councillors who brought up a glaring weakness in this report. There's no mention of the cost of this borrowing. And I would suggest you'd be a lot more accurate on speculating in the cost of borrowing than you would be on speculating how much water's been going through the system due to faulty meters not being paid for. And pardon me for doing this, but you know, the point about, you know, if people have leaking toilets, you know, most people can hear that in their house. And, you know, for us to have sensors that can alert people, I'll quote a former prime minister, I just really believe the state has no authority to be in the bathrooms of the nation. I think this is a bad idea at this time. Money better spent elsewhere. And elsewhere would be the much larger amount of water that is being lost through breaks. And for example, at 13th and Caribou this year, water was running at a prodigious rate out of a break for 5 days. And we were contracting pumping trucks to be down in the flats pumping up water. And if we have extra money that we can borrow, it's much better to go towards allocating the largest loss in the system, our underfunded cast iron program. I'll move receive and file.
Question, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Warren?
Thanks. Well, I mean, I think one of the discussion points is valid around the cost of borrowing or financing. So I guess it's probably prudent that we build that into the possible cost savings and the payback period for this. So in light of the defeat of the receive and file, I think there's still some interest in moving forward on this, but maybe to get more information. So I would move that we table this pending the financial component of the costing be included in the next report.
Warren? Question on the table motion, call. Question, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next items on the agenda are confidential matters. Requires closed camera. Confidential matter may be considered a closed session pursuant to section 94(2) of the City Tax Needs information that should get one or more of the exemptions of Part 3 of the local authority Protection Privacy Act, Section 18(1)C, Section 17(1)B(I), 1, 2, and D, and Section 18(1)C, and Section 21. And Section 15